Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for coming to my Volume 2 talk, where the last one was last year in Prague. Thank you all for coming. And today, this talk will generally be a continuation on some techniques that I talked last year, and a lot of techniques are also somewhat new. So before I properly begin, just wanna, for those who don't know, my name is Tomislav. I am a technical content designer at Croteam. Been working there for almost 10 years, and for the last almost 5 years, it's maybe more than 4.5 years, we've been working in Unreal Engine 5. We started, our first game in UE was Talos Principle 2, and our latest game was Talos Principle Reawakened, which is a remake of the first Talos Principle from 2013, 2012. And today I'm going to talk about 5 topics. First of them being the so-called domain system, which is a PCG-made system that aims to unify all procedural workflow in our projects. Specifically, it was used to replace foliage tools currently. Later, we'll even try to do that with landscape grass. Next, I'm going to talk about landscape materials and how we further refactor and refine the usage, and more specifically, how we moved away from Runtime Virtual Textures back to your ordinary streaming virtual textures. Third one will be somewhat of an obscure topic to content designers and technical artists, and that's the number of SRVs, and generally the topic of SRVs themselves, or shader resource views, how to control them, what creates them, and how to diagnose them. Next one, we'll talk about the volumetric fog subtraction system, which I'm pretty excited to tell you more about. And the last but not least will be a content library system, a solution, our own custom solution to control and manage third-party assets and manage the third-party assets creep in your own production projects. But a disclaimer before everything is that these techniques will be utilized and will be further refined in our future projects. And by that, I mean that maybe next year, if there's ever a Volume 3, we'll see about that. A lot of these techniques will be further refined. There will be new solutions, and some of these techniques might even be replaced by those same solutions. So nothing is set in stone. This is just a inspiration and motivation for further work and further efficiency of development. So let's go on to a first topic, and that is a domain system, a PCG-made system that aims to unify and replace currently existing foliage tools. Now, you might ask yourself, I don't know how many of you have ever used foliage tools, but they are pretty good, pretty user-friendly, specifically foliage painting tools, and also some maybe less known procedural foliage tools. They're very easy, fairly easy to use. Procedural tools maybe less so, because there is a slight learning curve when it comes to its parameterization and how different parameters within them act on their generation. But our own motivation was, since PCG came out some Unreal versions ago, we wanted to use PCG because it seemed pretty powerful in our initial experiments and usages of it. It appeared to be very powerful and very useful, but that is just another procedural system. So in essence, you would have 3 of them. So landscape grass with landscapes, you would have foliage tools with procedural foliage, and then you have PCG. And me, as a maintainer on the project of all those systems, I kind of don't want to go around the 3 different systems and 3 different data types and look out for all of them. So I just wanted to unify them into that one system. And generally, PCG compared to procedural foliage is very fast, unless you are working with, I don't know, hundreds of millions of points being generated. So this is an overview of the domain system in general. So to the left of the yellow line are the tools, 4 of them being quote-unquote local tools, and 1 of them being a kind of a global tool, because it works on a much larger scale, potentially. Then they are all fed by a single, a single main data type and another data type that's being specifically used for for the global tool. And all those points that are generated by those tools are going through a so-called global filter, of which we only have one specifically, global filter, and all those filtered points are going into the mesh spawner, which then spawns those points and meshes on those points. So first I'm going to talk about the core data type that we developed, or data asset that we developed for this domain system, and that is called domain instance settings. And as it says, it's a core element of the domain system. It defines what type of an instance will be spawned at the point of a tool or a group of tools. It defines all your ordinary parameters like cast shadows, lighting parameters, call distances, etc. One new thing you might see is the priority that defines how more often will this instance be spawned compared to other instances within the tool that this instance is being used. So this data type consolidation also helps you with maintaining and optimizing the whole system and just keeping it all in check. Now I'm going to briefly mention the local tools that we have, but later I'm going to talk about more in depth about two of them. So the first one is the single instance spawner, then the area tracer spawner. I'm going to talk about those two after this slide. But we also have spline bound spawner, which is a spline-based tool that spawns points within a closed spline. And the spline along spawner, which, as the name suggests, spawns points alongside an open spline. Now, here's a quick video that will showcase how the single instance spawner is used. Now, this tool has been, it was one of the first tools that was made because it's the simplest one. It aims to kind of replicate the behavior of the foliage single paint tool. I don't know, maybe some of you are aware of that one, which was pretty strong for precise definition of where we want to have different instances, specifically trees or bushes and such kind of foliage. Another blueprint utility widget that's like a twin tool to this one. It's a blueprint tool that enables you to select more static mesh actors of a single tree or whatever other foliage or other type of mesh you have. And you'll use this tool to replace all those meshes with single instance actors with the same instance settings. So it was much easier for our artists to use static mesh actors because they're already used to it. It's faster to just plop around different static mesh actors and then later when it's done, it's either me or they will just replace them with this single tool and put them in the domain system itself. Now, area tracer spawner is a bit of a different beast. So it spawns points within its volume and then it will cast like an area light, will cast those points onto the level geometry in an arbitrary orientation. So you can rotate it around and it acts as a arbitrarily or angle agnostic surface, which is pretty cool. So it can be used for different densely packed type of spawns like corals or dense brushery, I guess. Now here I have parameters on those blueprints from area tracer tool and single instance tool. You can compare them and see that a lot of parameters are pretty much the same in between, but some tools like area tracer tool, which is like a group point tool, has specific functionalities like clustering or point sampling, and in this case it's a sampler category. Now I'm going to talk about a bit the landscape surface tool, surface spawner, which is quote unquote a global tool. This one uses a higher order data type that we call an ecotope, and those ecotopes then can be browsed in the landscape surface tool per layer. So any layer can have an arbitrary amount of ecotopes. And those ecotopes can have an arbitrary amount of instance settings between them, and then they are sampled and spawned depending on the ecotope setup. So you might notice that ecotopes are somewhat similar to local tools. So you can look at it in a way that you have ecotopes are like a local tool per layer. So you have multiple local tools per layer. You might also ask, why don't you consolidate the spawner settings in local tools in an ecotope? Now, the local tools, the spawner settings of those tools have a lot of different parameters between them, so it would be very hard to unify that specifically. So they are still per blueprint tools rather than a data asset parameterization. Here's a quick video, and this is just a demonstration of how ecotopes are being used specifically in this example level. It looks fast here, but if you have a lot of ecotopes and a lot of those ecotopes have dense points being spawned, it can get slow. It's one of the avenues of the optimization I am definitely planning to undertake. Honorable mention of a tool is a rectangular remover. That is our only global filter. As you can see, wherever the red rectangle is, all instances are being removed. But you can also filter which instances you don't want to remove by, as you can see here, you can browse different instances in there. So it's an exclusive kind of a filter. I'm going to go over the tool architecture and how it works on a higher level, how the PCG itself kind of works. So every tool shares that similar pipeline scheme with the data sampling and the data assembly. Sampling is done via a get data nodes in PCG, and they are all filtered by class. So different one PCG graph will get the data from a single instance spawner, another one will get it from an area tracer tool, and that's all done by class, not by tag, as it is done by default. Then that data sampling is then the data that has been sampled is then used for points. So you can get points from a volume, from a spline surface, from a landscape, or just a single point in the world. Then another thing that is being sampled from that data is two types of settings: the instance settings from the domain instance settings data asset, and the spawner settings, which then are all cached as a point attribute inside the PCG. Then after all that composition has been done, we go through an initial point filtering like layer filtering, slope filtering, and such. And then we go through a tool-specific functionality like surface snapping, clustering, etc. And then we go through the self-pruning, or in case of an ecotope, we go through a hierarchical kind of pruning. And then we go through a global filter, and we then have your spawned meshes. Now, this is pretty much it about the domain tool. There are some future work that's going to be done mostly regarding the optimization of the workflow itself, so it's faster with more points, and maybe when the need arrives, there will be more tools to it. And also, I am definitely I definitely want to also attempt to bring landscape grass into the domain system through GPU compute and runtime procedural generation. Next topic will be the landscape material. Some of you who have been last year at my talk, I talked about the landscape material, but today I'm going to talk about a refinement and refactoring, and why we went from our Runtime Virtual Textures to streaming virtual textures. Why was that a necessity? Here are some screenshots that we have of the landscape. As you can see, we use Nanite tessellation and displacement with that tessellation. It's still fairly expensive, so it's more reserved to higher end machines. But even without it, it still looks pretty good. Now, you might ask yourself, as Epic itself has been marketing Runtime Virtual Textures in some of their talks, and they are I guess they are useful if you use them right in my opinion, fairly limited circumstances. But there are three main reasons why we moved away from them. First one is flexibility. There are numerous cases where we wanted to have a bit more of an intricate landscape, and we would always run into a problem where if you want to have an overhang of the landscape, you want to have even just a bit of a more vertical kind of a landscape, you couldn't necessarily do it because the RVT is being projected from top down, and whatever is on the overhang will also, whatever material is on the overhang will also be below that overhang. So you cannot have different layers in between them. And also, if we just wanted to have larger worlds, RVT would be fairly hard to scale to those worlds. You could use adaptive pages, but it would just incur much more memory that we wanted to have, that we wanted to deal with. Second reason is simplicity. Simplicity in material creation. So what goes into the RVT? What do you write into the RVT? What can you write into the RVT? And then when do you read from the RVT, and how can you read from it? And also from the level side, the setup for the landscape to use RVTs and write to them is a bit convoluted. You get used to it, but onboarding itself is a bit tricky with that one. One example I want to point out is that in the development of Talos Principle 2, we wanted to add subsurface to our landscapes and to snow. And on meshes that also have snow. And we managed to, it was fairly easy to add it to the meshes and to the landscape, but it was very problematic to have subsurface in the blending, because if you have RVT, of course, you would use it to blend, I guess, boulders or trunks with your landscape. But that blend wouldn't have that subsurface because there was no way at the time to get that data out into the RVT. Currently, I think that's possible because you have that float 4 mask in the RVT to write to, so that might be a way to do that now, but I guess a little too late, in my opinion. And the third reason is memory, which one of my colleagues that's not here, unfortunately, knows much more about. But in essence, we would always run, the only virtual texture pool that we would run out is the RVT pool, especially if you use Nanite Landscape and Nanite Tessellation. Whenever we would disable Nanite, the memory pool would go down in a fair bit, but when the Nanite Landscape was turned on, the pool would always explode. So the consensus was at the end of the development cycle that we would try and attempt to move away from RVT. So, but there was the process was done, and we went from Runtime Virtual Textures to streaming virtual textures, but we encountered a problem, and that is that the shader was using too many SRVs. And that problem was very annoying because I also encountered it some time ago, and I had never had, at the time, I didn't have too much experience with Unreal in general, so SRVs were a strange thing to me. So to encounter it again, I was very, very pissed. But I'll talk about how I managed to figure out how those SRVs are created through different diagnostic tools. But what we did to curb that was we did a different formatting of our textures. Because at the time, before we went to the virtual texture pipeline, we used 3 textures per layer, and we used 6 texture samples per that layer. So each texture was sampled 2 times. But the new texture that we formatted was, we call it NRD. So normal info goes to the RG of the texture, the roughness goes into the blue channel, and the displacement goes into the A channel. And with that, we went down from 3 textures to 2 textures per layer. And another optimization that we made to curb the 6 texture samples is that we started baking out our far textures. The reason why we had 2 samples per texture was that we would have a near tiling for the layer and far tiling for the layer. So we had a lot of redundant info being done per layer. So we would have a baked texture as a far texture, and that would just be a single sample. And we went from 6 to 2 samples. So it was immense saving on the SRV count in general. Now, I just want to shout out the YouTube channel called Visual Tech Art. Maybe some of you know him. He has a lot of entertaining videos, and one of his videos specifically called "The Only Texture a Game Needs" is a very entertaining video where he describes ways to create a single to create a mesh and a material from a single texture, not even like 2 textures that we have. He does a lot of interesting shenanigans in there. So that was kind of the inspiration for this specific action for the texture. For the formatting, I mean. Now, future work that we want to do is implement Mesh Blend. Shout out to Tore. Is a replacement for the RVT blending that we are currently missing, and we'll also add additional interesting blends even between the meshes themselves, not just the landscape. Next, I'm going to look into again the material layering system and possibly figure out a way to bring landscape material to the material layering system for the ease of use for our artists. Since currently we only have 12, no, not only, we have 12 hard-coded layers for our landscape. And the last thing that I'm definitely excited about is the mesh terrain, which is still, I guess, in heavy R&D. We heard a little bit about it, but I'm definitely excited to see how that continues to work, how that continues to be developed. Now, next is a related topic and is about shader resource views, and too many of them. In essence, Unreal supports up to 64 SRVs per material. So if you're using big, fat, layered materials, you might encounter this one. But if you look online, you won't have any specific guidelines on what creates SRVs and how they're created for Unreal. And Unreal itself doesn't really tell you exactly how many of them are created. So in this specific case, I'm going to take how we went to how SRV count can accumulate, and our specific example is the aforementioned landscape material. As you can see, we have up to 12 layers. Each of them had 3 virtual textures with 2 samples per VT, and then we would have other features like landscape stains, footprints, which was a render target. We would have glitter, which added 2 texture samples. So with that, it can easily accumulate, especially if you have heavy layered materials. But you also need not forget when you are working with landscapes that a landscape itself has some implied texture reads, one for the height map and one weight map for each 4 layers that you paint. So because layers are being fed to the RGBA channel of a weight map texture. So it easily accumulates. But generally, if you want to dig deeper into, if you have the same problem, or if you just want to know how much potential SRVs are you creating with your materials that are layered, you will have to use RenderDoc, a RenderDoc app, and which is really nice from Unreal, that you already have a RenderDoc plugin in Unreal that is disabled by default. So you can enable it, and with it you can capture the scene. But be warned that for me, in my latest research, is that DLSS doesn't like RenderDoc, doesn't work with RenderDoc. It works with NVIDIA Insight and maybe Pix. I'm not sure. Maybe someone who used Pix might know more about that. Then when you have prepared the RenderDoc, you can now prepare your level to have a clean slate for capture. An empty level with 1 landscape component on it and with a landscape material on it. For a baseline, I advise you to just fill that landscape component with a single layer to see the baseline of your SRV counts. And then when you're ready, you can capture it with the RenderDoc icon that will appear when the plugin is enabled near the perspective drop-down menu. And now a bit more about, I won't go too deep into RenderDoc because I myself am not very versed in RenderDoc. It's just a passing kind of usage. Before you do anything, I would just have to warn you that it takes time to open the capture. I was kind of taken aback how long it took. I thought my render dock crashed, but it takes a minute or two to actually open it. Then when you finally open it, you'll have to look on the right side of render dock for the event list and go look for the base pass for non-nanite, and for nanite you look for the nanite base pass. And here you can see how landscape material instance itself looks in the event list. And then when you found that, you can click on that and you'll find in your pipeline state tab, you'll go through the pipeline itself and go to the pixel shader for non-nanite and to CS, which is compute shader for nanite itself. Now, if you don't want to go through all this hubbub, I'll give you some couple of SRV cost guidelines that I found in my research for 3 specific cases, and there are probably more for render targets and such. First one will be for regular textures, so non-virtual textures, is you will have 1 SRV per unique texture. And as an example, I'll take imagine you have 1 texture that is being sampled 3 times, and the second case will be sampling 3 times but with different UVs. The first one will be with the same UVs. So in this case, both of those examples, you have 1 SRV created because you have 1 texture, no matter how many times you sample it or how many unique UVs you have. But for virtual textures, it's a different story. It's a 1 SRV per unique texture and plus 1 SRV per unique UV. So the latter, so the previous example with 1 texture being sampled 3 times, and if it's sampled with the same UV, you'll have 2 SRVs. But if it's sampled with 3 different UVs, you will have 4 SRVs. So 3 SRVs for the 3 unique UVs and 1 SRV for the unique texture. And now there's a third case, which is a bit of an outlier. That is a nanite landscape plus virtual textures. And that creates 1 SRV per unique texture. And note this, 2 SRVs per unique texture and not 1. So it will be for one texture that's sampled 3 times with the same UV, you'll have 3 SRVs created. But if you have 3 samples with 3 different UVs, you will have 7 SRVs. So 6 SRVs for the unique UVs and 1 SRV for the unique texture. Now, nanite landscape is an asterisk, but because if you use a normal mesh that's nanite, that's not landscape, and you use virtual textures on it, you will use the guideline for virtual textures because the normal nanite meshes do not create a second SRV. Now, why this happens, I'm not sure. Maybe I don't have that deep of a graphical programming knowledge, but this is just something that I noticed that happens. So you also have to take that into account if you have very layered materials. Another bonus guideline that I want to note is that nanite meshes themselves create a higher baseline SRV count than non-nanite meshes for various reasons. And specifically, in my research, I found that they create 5 more SRVs as a baseline itself. So it's a fairly short topic, but a fairly obscure one. So I hope that some of you who have encountered this might find it finally a bit more enlightening than I found it like two months ago. But on to the next one, the next topic, which is pretty dear to me, and in my opinion very cool, is volumetric fog subtraction, which is a system of well, as the name says, subtracting volumetric fog from a local area. Just like you have volumetric fog volumes, either material-driven or via Niagara, you would also potentially want a volumes of space that don't have volumetric fog if you have it globally set up. So we have our own solution that is material-driven and very flexible and very easy to use. And it's very easy to implement. You have plenty of resources on it. I recommend you Shor De Jong talk that he did, or that the video that he made that you can find on the Epic's website. Just look for local volumetric fog or local fog volumes that are material-driven or even volume materials. But there's only one. But there's one problem with them is that initially they are only additive. You cannot take away from the original fog itself. So we tried to develop a system for it, and that has three elements. So the aforementioned volumetric fog volumes. Second is a subtraction volume and activation volume. And the system architecture kind of looks like this, where activation volume as an actor handles subtraction volumes, takes their data, compiles it, and sends that data back, not back, but forward to the volumes material parameter collection that is then being sampled in the volume material itself. This is a quick video of a setup. So first we have a volumetric fog volume. We get a volumetric or activation volume itself. Then we add two subtraction volumes that are then added to the activation volume, and they are quote unquote activated, and they subtract the fog. Oh, I always love this moment. So a bit more about the elements itself. So a subtraction volume is a simple actor that has a box volume itself, and that box volume is a specifically a front end for the artist, where it defines an area and scale of the subtraction box for the volume itself. It doesn't do any data processing in itself. It's just a data holder actor in essence. But the activation volume is the kind of a heart of the system that can handle up to 10 subtraction volumes in itself, and it activates on the player overlap of the volume of the activation volume, and is then deactivated when the player leaves the volume. And that activation activates the subtraction volumes that are within designated to that activation volume, and that data from those subtraction volumes is being sent to the activation volume and compiled in there and then sent to the material parameter collection. So it fetches location and extents and compiles the data. There's a catch here. It's a current limitation of the system that I wish to remedy, is that you can only have one activation volume active at a time. Because of the limit of only 10 subtraction volumes being active at the time in the level. And also you cannot have you shouldn't have activation volumes overlapping each other. Now, what happens in the volume fog material? Here you can see the list of the 10 location and 10 extent vector parameters, and here's how they are sampled within the level. So nothing too special. Locations and extents are being sampled in there and are used inside a 3D box mask, which is a native Unreal Engine function, which creates a three-dimensional, as it says, box or a rectangle, which you can then use as a density term to subtract. With it, you can subtract the original volumetric fog that you have within. Now, future work entails a couple of things. First is to actually battle test it, because it's a fairly somewhat new system, and it's not yet being used actively within our production projects. But there are definitely avenues that we are going to use, and we just haven't had the time to actually use it correctly. So battle testing entails bugs and bug fixing, and adding new user experience tweaks to it, maybe adding new functionalities to it. So it's a system that's not yet as battle tested as I'd like it to be. Then, as you might noticed when I said that it takes location and extents, it doesn't take rotation in account. So currently, those volumes are axis aligned. You cannot rotate them. You can rotate the actors themselves, but the box that's inside the volume will not. So rotation is something a bit more complex, because it entails an HLSL node and some rotational trigonometry math, which I'm not the greatest guy at, so it's still something to do. Then I would definitely like to add more shapes to it. Currently we have a rectangle, but why not spheres and maybe even better cylinders? Because we have a lot of cases that we run up to is that of cylindrical rooms, cylindrical interiors. And also just better data sampling. So no activation volumes. I don't want the current limitation is that it's just a matter of man hours. I don't want to have 64 location parameters and 64 extent parameters, and additionally 64 rotation parameters inside my material parameter collection. So I definitely need to look into better data sampling, so I can have, I don't know, up to 1,000 or however much I can subtraction volumes per level. So I don't need to think about that middle management of activation volumes and which ones will be deactivated and which ones will be activated. So that's it for when it comes to this topic. And the last topic will be content library. That is our solution for handling third-party assets. And it's basically a middle manager between third-party assets and our production projects. So our previous workflow entailed just directly shoving and importing third-party assets into our production project inside a third-party directory with no safeguards being there at the beginning at all. And it quickly devolved into clutter inside our projects. It was fairly tough to see what's used and what's not used. The first effort that was done to alleviate that was the material consolidation, where previous to that we would have hundreds and hundreds of master materials from different third-party asset packs. So we had to do in this case, it was a 2-month effort to consolidate all used assets to use our own in-house materials and not and some third-party materials were whitelisted because they were fairly specialized in what they did. But then we developed a content library that would help our artists be more responsible in what they and how they use and import third-party assets. But what content library is exactly? It's a perforce thing. It's an intermediary repository or depot that purely holds third-party assets. So no changes being done to them in that project. They're just purely there as a pack that can then later be used. It is accessed through a separate workspace, in Perforce. So whoever wants to use them and get them into the production project needs to make that workspace in Perforce. So there's another layer of, I guess, a hurdle to not create chaos. And then those asset packs that you get into that workspace will be available for you to get into the production project. But how to access them is you access them through UGS. It is a custom tooling that we implement inside UGS. So when you get those, when you get the wanted asset packs into the workspace, you can then mount them through UGS, and then those will appear in your production project. Now that mounting is done by junctions, which is a Windows feature. Now, if you want to know more about that, this specific system was designed and made by our lead programmer that's here with us. His name is Goran. If you want to have any further questions regarding this specific tool, as I would definitely advise you to talk to him, because it is pretty cool. It hasn't had too many problems. I mean, no problems at all currently as we were using it. So it's definitely a cool tool that he made. Now, what happens then is that those packs will appear that you got in the workspace. They will appear here. Then you can mount them, and then they will appear in the content browser inside your project. So you can see here we have a content lib directory, and that's where your content lib projects that are pure third-party assets will appear. And then with them, you can do whatever you want. You can change them. You can put them in levels, test with them. You can even change them, change different aspects of them, change blueprint nodes, change whatever you want in the mesh or texture. But one thing you cannot do is you cannot check them in. You cannot submit them in Perforce. To do that, you'll first have to import them properly in content library, which there are multiple ways of importing them. First one is a per asset thing, where you select them in the content browser, and you then select an action for importing, and then all those meshes, all those assets, and all their dependencies will be migrated within the project. So migrate it from one folder to another. So basically copy it, and then you will have them inside the content lib imported, if you remember the folder below content lib itself. So that's where the imported files live. The second way is to have a level as a gallery for those assets, and then save that gallery. Then you can use that gallery and do an import on it. Then it will parse through all the assets within that library, within that gallery level. And we'll do the same thing, just like per asset. It will copy the assets and its dependencies into the content lib imported directory. Now, as I said, what actually happens is this solution did necessitate a small engine modification, so that the migration, quote unquote, as migration generally happens between projects, this is a functionality that is necessary for migration between folders inside a single project. So redirectors are created when the importing is done, but the engine itself sees those redirectors and just acts like, it doesn't see them. It actually doesn't care that they're there. So you can then, when you successfully import your assets, you can close the editor, then go back up. Those redirectors will be gone, and the imported assets will work just as good as if they were there. So it's a pretty cool system, and that is fairly streamlined. But the thing is that you also need a robust validation. This kind of an automation system, a management system for artists to keep the chaos of third-party assets in mind, is you cannot really automate the handling of third-party assets at all, because the standardization is non-existent. Every other pack uses a different standard, even packs that are within the same kind of an ecosystem like Mavi or Decogon could use different variations of materials or updated versions of materials. So you still have to have your validation, your validators. For example, material validators for seeing if those meshes are using our own in-house materials or whitelisted third-party materials, and mesh validators for like Nanite specific stuff or collisions or proper distance field setup and such. And whoa, I'm pretty fast. So that's it. That's it for this talk. Thank you very much for listening here. I hope that you had some useful stuff gotten from this talk, since all these techniques will probably be out of date next year. But I hope this acts as an inspiration for your own solutions or your own tools to not just help your colleagues, but help yourself. Because all of these tools I'm using, it's easier for me, because I'm not just a tech artist. I also do level art, lighting art. It's much easier for me to have custom-made tools that are tailored to us and to me and to our user experience. The development is faster, and with the faster development, better efficiency, better optimization, the game itself will be better. So that's all. I guess we have time for Q&A, right? Yeah.